Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions: who am I, and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. Today's episode is part of our conversation series. I'm just one voice in this relationship diversity movement, and it's important to bring more unique perspectives into the conversation. Today, I'll be talking with Tamara Pincus about her therapy work with LGBTQ and non-monogamous clients, as well as fat liberation and how it relates to relationship diversity. But first, a little about her. Tamara Pincus is a licensed clinical social worker and AASECT certified sex therapist who runs the Pincus Center, which offers therapy, coaching, and sex education. She specializes in working with kinky, polyamorous, and LGBTQ clients. Tamara has been working in the field of sex therapy since 2011, and since then has built a practice with a team of 13. Tamara is passionate about racial justice, fat justice, and LGBTQ rights. She also co-authored a book called It's Called Polyamory, Coming Out About Your Non-Monogamous Relationships with Rebecca Hills. She lives in Virginia with her partner, her kids, a friend, and 2 pet snakes. Let's get into the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Relationship Diversity Podcast. I am so excited for my guest today. Tamara Pincus is here. She runs the Pincus Center for Inclusive Treatment and Education. And one of the reasons I'm really excited about having Tamara on is because if you've listened to any of my episodes, a lot of times I will talk about one of my tips for whatever you might be dealing with is to work with a professional. And I emphasize to work with a professional who is supportive of diverse relationships, diverse lifestyles, diverse identities, and how important that is. And here Tamara is, talk to us all about her center and her book, and I'm just so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here, Tamara.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the work that you do, what your inspiration is, and we'd love to learn more about you.
So, I think sexuality has always been one of my primary interests. I think it is for a lot of people. I started, really doing as much research as I could as a kid, reading more romance novels than it is at all reasonable. I came out as bisexual in high school, and then I did some sex education stuff in college, and then I helped start a BDSM group at my college. And I graduated from school and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was, just doing admin work and trying to figure out what to do with my life. And my parents were horrified that I hadn't gone to grad school. I'm still the least educated in my family. So they sent me to a job coach, and the job coach is like, what do you like to do? And me with my early 20s rebellious attitude was like, I like to talk about sex. And she was like, you could actually do that. And I was like, oh, I went and interviewed one of the local sex therapists in the DC area, and I followed her career track pretty exactly. She went to Catholic University, which at the time was one of the few social work schools that had a class on sexuality. I would not make that choice again, but I did.
What year was this?
So we had that conversation in 2001, and I went back to school in 2002. So quite some time ago. Catholic University has become actually much more conservative than it was,
Oh.
which is interesting. Like the social work school particularly has, social workers tend to be pretty like liberal and out there and accepting, but also Catholicism is a little bit less that, particularly with sexuality. And I didn't really think much about when I was there about how there was like no LGBT group on campus. I got to the end of it. I think I was feeling more sort of triggered around the abortion stuff at the time, because the job I had while I was like trying to get myself ready to go to social work school was working on an abortion referral hotline, which is really powerful work and also makes you particularly incensed about the current state of the government and of the country.
Yes.
It's pretty wild, because even then it was hard to get abortions for some people, particularly kids who had to get parental consent, or like there was just, people who didn't have any money, which of course it was not going to get better if they had more kids. So then like I started at this school that was very anti-abortion and had shipped in buses full of people every year for the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And so went to school, did public mental health for 7 years because there were no jobs in sex therapy, started a private practice, got clinical supervision, and took a whole lot of courses about sexuality in order to become ASEX certified. And then went back around that whole process to get certified as a sex therapy supervisor. So I actually train people on how to provide sex therapy. And I specialize in working with people who are involved in ethical non-monogamy, BDSM, and often LGBTQ populations. I really get to serve my people, which is really nice. It has its downsides, can't go to the local dungeon, but it has its upsides.
But you're helping people.
Exactly. You're helping people, and you're helping people in a way that they really might have trouble getting help from other people, because other people don't understand the complexity of how relationships can be. And a lot of people have told me stories about telling their therapists that they're non-monogamous or interested in non-monogamy, and just getting told that's terrible and you're crazy, or that's the reason you have all these problems, and having a lot of judgment. From when I started my practice, I've been very open about being non-monogamous. I sort of accidentally outed myself very early on to the president of the Greater Washington Society for Clinical Social Work. It was like at a party, and I was just like, my last weekend I was with my boyfriend, and then blah blah blah. And then my husband, blah, blah, blah. And then I didn't even realize who I was talking to. Like, I did not know. So she was like, you should do trainings on this. And I did. So yeah, I've been doing this stuff a long time.
And you've really grown your practice. There's a lot of other therapists that work in your practice, right?
Yeah. We're at 16 right now. We're going to probably be down to like 14 in like some of the people who've been working with me for a while are going to start their own practice in the fall, which actually I'm kind of happy about it. I think that they've grown to the point where it makes sense that they would want to do that. They can't all work for me forever. And I feel like I do a lot of mentoring people early in their career so they can go out there and like flourish on their own. So it started with just me. I worked just by myself for 6 years. And then I hired one person and then I hired more people. And then in 2021, I hired somebody who I was like, it would be really nice to have an admin and to like teach a class every once in a while. And somehow from that, we grew a whole education program. So we teach classes on ethical non-monogamy, BDSM, fat empowerment and fat dating, and body justice, and also just basic dating skills. How to use a dating app, how to do a first date so it goes well, those kinds of things. I think it's particularly helpful sometimes for people who are neurodivergent, who like need somebody to tell them what the unspoken rules are. It's been really going well.
Are these online courses?
Yeah, they're all done on Zoom. We started this when it was still pretty heavy pandemic times, and we tried to do some hybrid classes where we had some people in person and some people on Zoom. It didn't really work very well. So we've gone to full Zoom, and I think one of the things about that is that it's also really much more accessible for people in other places. It's not like there's a lot of places where you can get classes like this. And we also offer sliding scale. And if people missed a class and they want to get it later, we offer recordings. we're working on getting an online platform up so people can just download classes on demand. Because I feel like there's some things that you figure out you want to do the thing, and it would be really nice to have a class on it. Like we've been thinking like a threesome class would be really good to do that way. Like you've decided you want to have a threesome. How do you do this so it's not a disaster?
Yeah, those kind of things are because they are, I think, in the past hidden. It's like you've got to find your way. And what I love that you're doing so openly is you are bringing it into the light, which I think is really important to destigmatize diverse relationships.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate that work. And if people wanted to work one-on-one with you, are they able to do that via Zoom?
For therapy, people need to be in a state where the therapist is licensed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm licensed in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Then most of the people in my practice are in that area. But we actually have a few coaches on staff. I just hired Elizabeth Schaff to do coaching.
We love Elizabeth Schaff. We had her on the podcast.
Yeah, she's the best. And we also have Rebecca Rose Vassy, who's been doing ethical non-monogamy for many, many years, but also she does burlesque and she's done sex education for a very long time. And she does a lot of work with people who are trying to figure out how to date, who need more individual work around that. So dating coaching stuff. And then we have Janelle and Fisher, who has training as an interfaith minister and in pastoral counseling, but she also has a ton of training in like embodiment exercises and breath work and tantra. So people who want to learn how to really get in their bodies and being able to like really experience pleasure do really well to work with her. And she also does work with non-monogamous couples around those kinds of things. To circle back around to Eli, one of the things that she's going to be doing in the fall is running a group for people who are in relationships that are mixed with a monogamous person and an ethically non-monogamous person. So like mono-poly relationships or relationships where people's relationship style is different, to sort of help people work out how they can stay in a relationship even if the kind of relationship the person wants is different. How can they sort of make peace with that and figure out what can work? Because I think a lot of people just tend to think those relationships are doomed and there's no hope for them, but there are a lot of people out there doing it who've been doing it for a long time. So we have to learn from the strategies that work and like give people the opportunity to stay with people that they love if they can make it work.
Yeah, I think that there are so many societal and cultural programming on what relationships should look like that has to be unpacked. I mean, I'm looking at that within myself daily, sometimes hourly, of like, is this a belief that I was raised that feels aligned with me? Or is this just something that I took on, who knows where, probably unconsciously by watching like a Disney film when I was 11 or something, of how relationships should be. And what I love about that idea of coaching different relationship structure desires is that it allows the unique design of a relationship structure that works with the unique people involved. And that can be really powerful. In your time working, because you've been working in this area for a long time, 20 years, what have you seen as the evolution, specifically in diverse relationships? How have you seen that evolve over the 20 years that you've been working with that?
There's a lot of things. I think things have come out of the closet a lot more. A lot of people are talking more about the ethical non-monogamy stuff that they're doing. When I started my practice, most people didn't know the word polyamory. And now most people know the word polyamory. It's not so far out there that nobody's heard of it. And I think in the last few years, you're seeing a lot of people sort of decide that this is a thing that they want. And it seems to me to be possibly related to people being stuck at home with one partner during the pandemic. And now I'm like somebody who I haven't uh, been stuck with all this time. That's just a pet theory. I think one of the other things that I've seen is a real shift in the way that swinging has worked. You know, when you look back at the sort of past history of what swinging looked like, and you look at like a sex party now, the expectation of being a couple and the expectation that the sex happens when you trade partners is really shifting. You don't see a lot of that in the same way as you used to. I think people are more open to different configurations, which I think is helpful, because I feel like when you're doing the partner swapping thing, a lot of people end up having sex with people they don't really want to because like, their partner thinks one of the people in the other couple is hot. That's not good. I don't want anybody to ever have sex they don't want to have.
That just makes the wound a little deeper.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that there has been a shift in the poly community to be more diverse, or at least to acknowledge that diversity is a thing. I think when I started going to poly conventions, also in 2011, it was like every single person was white. And I think that, like, I'm not sure that it 100% fixed, but I feel like more people of color are sort of talking openly about having multiple relationships and are involved in the community. And I think that makes a difference. And I do think, like, also, like, you're seeing the rise of like the sort of Black and poly, like, separate Black communities for ethically non-monogamous people. I think that ethical non-monogamy has really actually been there for a long time. People have worked out agreements in their marriages, and things have happened, or in their queer relationships, which also had to be under the table. And I think they've always been there and always had to be secret. And I'm always hearing about people uncovering past things that happened, both cheating and like things that people knew about and just didn't say anything.
Well, that was I grew up with, a father who had an affair, and it really broke up our family. So, my response to this was everything being out in the open, and being conscious about it and talking about it before it ever happens. That was empowering for me and in my journey in the poly world. What do you find in your work that non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, what kind of people does that really work for? That really, like, that can make that feel good, feel successful, feel like it is a nourishing, safe experience. And successful, I don't necessarily take as like something that lasts a long time. I just call successful something that just feels like it was a really good experience.
I mean, I think that the really important thing for success in ethical non-monogamy, success meaning you enjoy yourself and nobody hates each other at the end of it, is really being able to work on your stuff. Feelings are going to come up. If you have any abandonment issues, they are coming to the front. If you have any kind of attachment stuff, avoidant attachment or anxious attachment, that is all going to come up. But if you're willing to deal with it and have a conversation about what are the things that hurt you and how can you feel better and how can you support each other through that process, I think a lot of people have the capacity for it. I think there's another piece of like, is this something that you want? Like, it's a lot of work. And so I think if you feel too overwhelmed with whatever else is going on in your life, it doesn't make sense to add another relationship. Like, racial relationships are so much work. I mean, and I think that is also a space for other forms of non-monogamy. Like, I feel like if it feels like too much work, maybe just hooking up with people every once in a while, or hiring a sex worker, because they're not going to stick around and expect you to stay in touch, is helpful in that way. It also can sort of move around some of the issues people have with, oh my God, you're going to leave me for this person.
Right. With there's no emotional connection, that it is, an exploration sexually or physically. And that's, all it is, that might feel safer for people. But I think mainly what you're saying is that there are options. And I think that a lot of times people want this kind of like, I want it exactly like this, and there's no budging, where you can get some of your needs met with it looking maybe a little bit different, which is something I think probably you could help people with in terms of like talking through it. Definitely the point you said about working on yourself, like, yes, 100%. I'm waving like my pom-pom cheerleader. Absolutely. But also coming up with creative solutions and understanding like really why you want to do it to help you know what kind of creative solution could help you get some of that. Do you work with just single people? Do you work with couples? Do you work with triads?
We work with all of those. And we also have people on the team who work with teens as well. Usually not around relationship issues. Usually that's more around identity stuff.
Well, I'm curious your perspective because I know you have children, younger children. What do you see in this next generation in terms of their, I guess, perspectives on identity, relationships, sex? What are you seeing that's different from our generation?
I mean, it's interesting. And I feel like there's data to back up that that teenagers are actually slower to have sex now than they were when we were young.
Mm.
Which is interesting. A lot of teenagers are watching a lot of porn and learning about sex from porn, which is terrible. And we need to do a good job of like actually providing real sex education. The gender expansiveness in kids are so used to having non-binary people and having trans people in their world. And so it's interesting. I live in Virginia, so there's all this drama with the governor putting out policies and saying that you are only allowed to call kids by the name that their parents tell you you can call them and those pronouns, and like letting them use those facilities and those things. So I literally yesterday, I have a daughter who's trans. So I was at back to school night being like, how do we change her name in your system? So certainly I'm open to those things. And also just the normality with how that was handled, like by the school and the other kids versus like the policies that you're getting from the governor. Clearly the kids are not like, this girl should use the boys' room. No. And I think as far as relationships, like clearly all the kids all know about non-monogamy. There is still a lot of immaturity and they have trouble talking to each other about hard things. Teenagers mostly. My kids, being raised by a therapist, do talk about everything. I do have one of my kids who is poly, who does have 2 relationships right now, and he seems to be doing fine with it. There's a lot of processing, but he's grown up in a house with a lot of processing. But I think like he's always telling me stories about his friends who like people are cheating on each other, people are breaking up over the cheating. And I think that's, and cheating in high school is like hold hands with somebody else or you kiss somebody else, but at least in high school these days. So yeah, they're not in great shape to have multiple relationships, but they know about it. So I think over time you will see that the younger generation, I think, will be doing more non-monogamy. I mean, also like the 20 somethings are all over it.
No, I think you and I are around the same age or like in the same generation. And even the evolution of LGBTQ in, from like me, the 70s and 80s up to the 2023, I feel like relationship diversity is following in the footsteps of that. Do you find that?
I mean, I think that makes sense in that like it's just starting to be more known now. And like when I was coming out in the early 90s, it was, much more edgy to be queer than it is now. Though I do still think there are spaces where it's still very hard to be queer. I think it's very hard, particularly for like male sexual fluidity, for instance, is just sort of coming to the light. Like I feel like, when I was in high school, everybody wanted to date a bi girl so you'd make out with another girl, but we're only now getting to everybody wants to date a bi guy so you can watch them make out with another guy. Only now do we have this joy in our lives.
Oh, yes.
I'm for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to move to the book that you've written. You've co-authored a book called Polyamory: Coming Out About Your Non-Monogamous Relationships. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
So me and Rebecca came up with this idea that like we were trying to figure out what is it that people really need as far as poly resources, because there wasn't that much out there at that time. And we didn't see anything about coming out issues. So we were like, let's do it. And so we sat down and the first thing we did was write an outline, and it was like, okay, who do you come out to? Well, first you come out to yourself, and then you come out to your partners, and then you come out to your to your family, and then maybe you come out to your kids, or maybe you don't, or, then you come out at work. Like these are, and then like the community. So those are basically the chapters of the book. It's pretty like sort of straightforward. And I mean, and we do start at the beginning with like what polyamory is, just in case people don't have that background going in. And I think made some pretty good suggestions, we think, about, making sure to like find a time where it's not like super difficult. Like don't come out at Thanksgiving dinner. Like if you think people are going to lose their shit, do it in writing so that they can have their panic attack somewhere else where they're not yelling at you.
Yeah, it's a big process coming out in any way from, I guess, yes, you talk about coming out to yourself first. That is a big part of it. Going through that time where working with a therapist or a coach is really helpful because I'll ask you, working with people who are in the process of accepting something about themselves that maybe they've judged or they're scared other people are judging. How do you help them initially start that process?
I think we first start with a lot of real normalizing desire, normalizing loving lots of people. Like we get these messages that it's not okay to like love people, and you should love both of your kids or all of your kids. I have two, clearly I said both. But like you're not supposed to love other adults. And why? I don't know why I keep finding this coming up in therapy, but I do. The way in which we're taught that we have to only love one person. So once we have that person, often we shut down. Like you can't let that conversation go too deep. You can't let yourself really feel alive. Because I feel like a lot of sexual desire is just about feeling really alive and connected and opening up to like let yourself really be out there. And if you are scared that, well, but they might have feelings for me or I might have feelings for them, you have to sort of dull yourself down a little bit. And I think also women do this a lot because men are predatory. They've been trained to be predatory. So like you're always trying to like not be too shiny because you don't want them to come onto you or come after you. So I feel like there's also this piece of like really letting yourself be free. There are people for whom being truly free means you only want to have sex with one person, and that's fine. But I think even for monogamous people, letting yourself really be open and have deep relationships is really powerful.
Yeah.
And being in a world where you are surrounded by people who love you, where you have a community and a family of choice or of birth, either, that like you can really feel safe with.
Yeah, Tamara, that's really powerful and hits me like right in my heart because I've always felt like I've had such capacity to love. I really this is not healthy, but I mean, there's a part of me that's like, if I could just take the world's pain away and bring love to every heart in the world, like I mean,
It's too
that's
much
just,
for one person.
it's too
But
much
we
for
can all
one
do it
person.
together.
Right. So I've given up that I need to do that, but like instead helping people to heal those beliefs that say love is limited and I need to love in a certain way because this is what I've been shown instead of, and sometimes it's the environment we grew up in that was, it's just learned experience. And then we take that on as our own. So it's really breaking what we've learned, whether from family or culture or society, and choosing another way and having someone like Tamara help us to do that. It's so powerful because I do believe that if we all opened ourselves up to that experience, and yes, I can feel that, I think, in past relationships where I had this judgment of I'm with this person, so I should not feel the spark that I feel with this other person. And that did feel like a part of me was being squashed and I wasn't able to be my true self. And that kind of resistance and then the numbing, I feel like that creates depression and sadness and lost living.
Yeah, I mean, and I think for a lot of people, and I know I felt this way, that like I felt like a bad person when I would have a crush on somebody else when I was in a monogamous relationship. I was like, I am bad. And even if I confessed, I'm sorry, I also have feelings for this other person. I won't act on it. It will be okay. I promise not to do anything. I was ashamed. And We don't need that.
Mm-mm.
We don't need that.
I feel like a lot of your work is about releasing shame around so many aspects.
Yeah.
And I feel that, what I've talked to you about and what I've read about fat justice is a
Mhm.
big part of releasing shame. Can you talk
Mhm.
a little bit about your work in that?
The fat justice work that I've done has really been basically comes straight out of my own stuff.
Mm.
I mean, I definitely, I'm a fat person. I've always been a fat person. And I really got the message growing up that if you're fat, you're unlovable. And if you
Mm.
can't make yourself thin, then like that is a, moral failing. If you were good enough, if you starved yourself enough and exercised enough, you would look the way that society wants you to look. And obviously for me, it didn't work. Obviously for most people, trying to make themselves thinner only makes themselves fatter.
Mm.
That's where the data lies 95% of the time. So one of the things that brings on is this sort of, there's this cultural stigma about fatness, and a lot of people when they choose a partner are choosing a partner based on also on like societal thoughts and like status. And so there's been this long history of fat people dating and but being a secret. So like somebody will date you, but they won't go out in public with you. And they'll like pretend they don't know you if they see you on the street, but they're sneaking in your window at night. So I think one of the things that we've really been working on is like, how do we help fat people accept themselves? Help people see fat people as attractive, which
Mm.
frankly is not that hard. Like BBW is way up there in the porn searches that exist.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I feel like big men haven't gotten as much positive press. We need more like fat men are hot. Definitely. I feel like the bears are trying. But so, at the center, we have done classes specifically for fat people on dating. We've done classes on body image to just sort of help people make peace and work towards acceptance. I feel like what we want to do is sort of start with making peace with your body and just, kind of tolerating it and then accepting it. And then if if you can get to love, that is what we should all strive for. Sonia Renee Taylor writes a really good book about The Body Is Not an Apology, which is a really good book for like helping work through some of the feelings around fatness and learning to accept yourself as being worthy of joy and pleasure like right now.
Yeah.
So we've done those things. We actually ran a fat pool party over the summer, which was great, and we will probably do that again.
Ooh.
But a lot of those have been sort of popping up around the country, like to just have people be unapologetically fat in a bathing suit. Because I feel like we get so much of, you have to have that beach body and you have to look good in a bikini and you must starve yourself in the spring so you can look good in the bikini. And so for us to just be like, we're going to go and put on that bikini and sit in the pool and it does not matter, can be really powerful. It can be very powerful.
Definitely. Definitely. And I love that there's a reclamation of the word fat.
Yes, yes. I have been criticized on some of the professional listservs for using the word fat by people using the phrase morbidly obese. And I'm
Mm.
gonna say, like, no, fat is better, but it's being reclaimed in the same way that the word queer has been reclaimed.
Hmm.
And people who can't say fat, that word is dirty, and that word is just the most obvious descriptor of what my
Hmm.
body looks like. So like if you can't say what my body looks like, what does that say about how you feel about me? um
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think about just body image and I have wounding around that from
mhm,
my mom, from her mom.
mhm,
I've like traced the way that they talked about their bodies, the way they felt about their bodies. And that's why I know when we first met and you used that word fat and it definitely like I had a reaction to it, honestly. And I told you it's like, I had never heard it reclaimed in the way that I'm hearing queer reclaimed. It's a reclamation. It's saying, this is who I am and I accept and I love myself. And it is really powerful. I'm thankful for that interaction that you and I had at dinner that one night, because it really got me thinking about my own wounding around that word and took me on a journey to do healing around it.
Yeah. I mean, I think just fat stigma is so woven into our culture that a lot of the time we don't even notice it. Like, it is just so clear to everybody that the best way to be is smaller, that like when you say things about it, people just don't even acknowledge it as this is a way of expressing stigma. But there are spaces that I go into, like the gym, which I love to work out. Weirdly, I'm the 350-pound woman at the gym with the glorifying obesity shirt on. That whole space, most people are there to avoid looking like me. Like, I am the embodiment of their fear. And so when I go in there and I have fun and it makes me happy and I'm like dancing around and smiling, I feel like that does just a little to maybe undo this idea that they have that being fat is the worst thing you could be.
Wow.
Like, I feel the goal of life for me is to be happy, to experience pleasure and try to make a world where as many people as possible can experience as much pleasure as possible. So that also includes social justice and maybe fixing the world being on fire. But I think we really, we really start from pleasure, and this pleasure activism, great book. Definitely read it.
Okay, I'm gonna tag that in the show notes.
Yeah, Adrienne Marie Brown. Because I think one of the things that we talk about is how pleasure is seen as this thing that you're not supposed to seek when you're doing something, like when you're working or when you're working on an issue. But pleasure is the thing that will make us want to continue working on that issue. And there's a phrase in that book that is a quote from somebody else. I made myself a little poster of it, and it says, "I have a big belly and I love my belly." And it's like such a radical thought, because most of the time, like, that's where the fear around fatness centers. It's like, oh my God, what if I have a belly? So what if I have a belly?
Exactly.
I could just rub on it like the Buddha.
Yeah. Yes. And find contentment. Well, that's my question is, do you think it's possible to experience pleasure if you aren't able to accept yourself?
I mean, I think you can have moments. I also think there's this idea that like acceptance is like place you get to. We never get there. Right? You never 100% get there. Like, I'm in here talking about loving my belly and petting it, and I'm like, there are days where I still am. I really fucking wish I was thin. I wish I could like rip this belly off of me. I wish that I felt like I could get weight loss surgery and be thin without shitting my guts out for the rest of my life. But because it would be lovely to walk around in the world and be treated well. So even I don't accept myself 100%, but now I accept myself most of the time. And I feel like what we're doing is working towards accepting ourselves most of the time, or more of the time. And so I feel like you can experience pleasure in a moment. And it may be that moment you're actually accepting it yourself. It may be that moment that you're sufficiently distracted that you aren't thinking about yourself. Like, you may be in a moment of, I don't know, like, I just jumped in the pool and it feels amazing. And you just like feel the water on your skin, and you're able to feel that joy, even if you're not thinking, I'm great. You're probably not thinking about yourself. Like, I
right.
feel like
You're just in the moment, kind of in a sensory place, feeling it on your body, that kind of pleasure. Yeah.
I think it's worth striving for acceptance. I think hating yourself will bring nothing but misery, because if you hate yourself, you're not going to do the things to make your life better.
Yeah.
And I think we do so much to shame people into doing better. And why, if you're such a terrible person, why would you do work to make things better for this person that you hate?
Exactly. Right. Which is, again, that self-work that we take on to bring more joy into our lives. And yeah, that's all really powerful stuff. I love it. I'm just having just so much of a like big aha kind of body moments with all the things that you're saying. So thank you. If people want to connect with you on your classes, on your services, maybe on Eli's coaching, your other coach, how is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So the best way to get in touch is to go to my website, www.tamarapincus.com. You can sign up for our mailing list, and then you'll hear about all of our classes and stuff. You can write contact@tamarapincus.com if you want to set up a coaching or a therapy appointment, or you can also just like look at the list of all of the staff who are there and pick whoever feels like they would be somebody you want to talk to. And then you can just rate them directly.
That's amazing. Tamara, your work in the world is so powerful. Thank you for being here and talking about all that we talked about. I really just feel very honored to know you and have you in the circle of amazing experts that are part of this relationship diversity movement. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslow.com, Instagram, or TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are.